the pistol shot that rang through the dusty main street of Eureka Springs, Arkansas on that scorching July afternoon in 1882 was not aimed at Hannah Jenkins, but the insult that followed might as well have been a bullet to her chest. She stood outside the Mercantile, her worn traveling dress clinging to her frame, her face flushed from both heat and humiliation as three ranch hands from the double bar spread laughed at her expense. "You really think you can turn things around out there?" The tallest one sneered, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "Lady, that ranch has been cursed for 3 years running. Drought killed the cattle, disease took the horses, and the land itself seems set on dying. But sure, your pretty words and sunshine disposition will fix everything." Hannah lifted her chin, her honey-colored eyes bright despite the mockery. "I believe that with hard work, faith, and a positive outlook, any situation can improve. My uncle left me that property, and I intend to honor his memory by making it thrive again." The men dissolved into fresh laughter, slapping their thighs as if she had told the funniest joke in the territory. Other townsfolk had stopped to watch the spectacle, some shaking their heads with pity, others with barely concealed amusement. Hannah felt her cheeks burn hotter, but she refused to let tears form. She had traveled over 800 miles from Philadelphia to claim her inheritance, had said goodbye to everything familiar, and she would not be deterred by a few cruel words. "Girl does not know what she is in for," another hand said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That land is harder than iron and twice as unforgiving. Her optimism will last about as long as a snowflake in August." Hannah gathered her packages and turned away, her spine straight despite the weight of their ridicule. She had heard similar sentiments from nearly everyone she had met since arriving in Eureka Springs 2 days ago. The lawyer who had handled her uncle's estate had looked at her with something close to pity. The hotel proprietor had tried to convince her to sell the land sight unseen and return east. Even the minister had gently suggested that perhaps the Lord had other plans for a young woman of 22 than struggling with a failing ranch. But Hannah had spent her entire life being told what she could not do, what she should not attempt, how her dreams were too big for someone of her station and gender. Her parents had died when she was 15, leaving her in the care of an aunt who believed young women should be seen rarely and heard never. Hannah had worked as a seamstress, a teacher's assistant, and finally as a companion to an elderly widow who had been the only person to encourage her spirit rather than try to crush it. When Mrs. Pemberton had died and left Hannah a small inheritance, and when the letter had arrived about her uncle's ranch, it had felt like Providence itself was giving her permission to finally pursue something of her own. She made her way down the wooden sidewalk toward the livery stable, where she had arranged to rent a horse and wagon for the journey to her property. The ranch was 12 miles outside of town, nestled in the Ozark foothills where the landscape shifted from the picturesque limestone bluffs near town to rougher, more challenging terrain. She had seen it only once, driven out by the lawyer in his buggy, and while she could not deny the place looked worse for wear, she had also seen its potential. The house was solid, built of good timber with a stone foundation. The barn needed repairs but was salvageable. The land itself was beautiful, with a creek running through the eastern portion and natural springs that gave the whole region its name. "Miss Jenkins," a voice called out as she passed the blacksmith's forge. She turned to see a man in his late 20s approaching, wiping his hands on a leather apron. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of a winter sky. There was something in his expression that was not mockery, which made Hannah pause rather than hurry on. "Yes. Name is Russell Foster. I run the Broken Creek Ranch adjacent to your property." He extended a calloused hand, and Hannah shook it, noting the strength in his grip and the directness of his gaze. "I wanted to introduce myself before you headed out there. I knew your uncle, Thomas Jenkins. He was a good man." "Thank you," Hannah said, feeling the familiar ache of loss. She had not known her uncle well, had met him only twice in her childhood, but his letters over the years had been kind and encouraging. "That is good to hear." Russell Foster shifted his weight, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I also wanted to say that I overheard what those hands said to you just now. They are fools. Drought and disease are not curses. They are challenges that every rancher faces. Your uncle had some hard luck, true enough, but the land is good. It just needs someone willing to fight for it." Hannah felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she had been carrying since arriving in this skeptical town. "You do not think I am foolish for trying." "I think you would be foolish not to try," Russell said simply. "Though I will not lie to you, it will be harder than anything you have likely faced before. Do you know anything about ranching?" "Not yet," Hannah admitted, "but I can learn. I am not afraid of hard work." Something flickered in Russell's eyes, something that might have been respect or might have been the beginning of interest. "I believe you. Listen, my ranch is about 3 miles west of your property. If you need anything, supplies, advice, or help with something you cannot manage alone, you come find me. Out here, neighbors help neighbors. That is how we all survive." "Thank you, Mr. Foster. That is very kind. Call me Russell. And you should know, I have been keeping an eye on your place since your uncle passed last spring, making sure squatters did not move in, that sort of thing. I left everything as it was, but I did board up one window that got broken in a storm." Hannah felt a rush of gratitude. "I do not know how to thank you. No need for thanks. Like I said, it is what neighbors do." He glanced toward the western sky where the sun was beginning its slow descent. "You planning to head out today?" "Yes, I have a wagon hired." Russell frowned slightly. "It will be getting dark by the time you arrive. Might be better to wait until morning, get a fresh start." "I have been waiting long enough," Hannah said firmly. "I want to see my home." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I understand that. Tell you what, let me ride out with you. I can help you get settled in, make sure the place is secure for the night. These hills are mostly safe, but a woman alone should take precautions." Hannah's first instinct was to refuse, to prove that she could manage on her own, but practicality won over pride. She was in unfamiliar territory, and having someone who knew the area could only be wise. "I would appreciate that, Russell." His face relaxed into something approaching a smile, though it was clear he was not a man who smiled easily. "Give me 15 minutes to finish up here and saddle my horse. I will meet you at the livery." True to his word, Russell arrived at the livery stable just as Hannah was loading her trunk and supplies into the rented wagon. He rode a sturdy roan gelding and led a pack mule that he explained carried some basic provisions: flour, beans, coffee, and a few other necessities, he explained. "Consider it a welcoming gift." They set out as the afternoon heat began to ease into something more bearable. The road west from Eureka Springs wound through beautiful country, with thick forests of oak and hickory giving way to rocky outcroppings and meadows where wildflowers still bloomed despite the summer drought. Russell pointed out landmarks, the old Crowley place that had been abandoned years ago, the creek where the best fishing could be found, the turn that led to his own ranch. "How long have you been ranching?" Hannah asked as the wagon jostled over the rutted road. "Born into it," Russell said. "My father started the Broken Creek when I was just a boy, back in '63. He died 5 years ago, left the place to me and my brother, but my brother wanted no part of ranching. He took his inheritance money and went to San Francisco. Have not heard from him since. That must be difficult, running a ranch alone. I have 3 hands who work for me, good men who know their business, and I have gotten used to the solitude. There was something in the way he said it that suggested the solitude had not been entirely by choice. What about family? A wife? Hannah asked, then immediately felt her cheeks warm at her own boldness. Forgive me, that is too personal. No, it is a fair question. I was engaged once, 4 years back. Girl named Mary Sullivan. She was the daughter of a rancher over in Newton County. But when my father died and things got hard, she decided ranch life was not what she wanted after all. She married a banker from Little Rock instead. I am sorry. Russell shrugged, but Hannah could see the old hurt still lingered. Worked out for the best, I suppose. If she could not handle the hard times, she would not have made a good rancher's wife anyway. This life requires a certain kind of strength. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon wheels, the steady clip of hooves, and the evening songs of birds settling in for the night. Hannah found herself studying Russell when she thought he was not looking. He had a rugged handsomeness that was nothing like the refined gentleman she had known in Philadelphia. Everything about him spoke of capability and endurance, from the easy way he sat his horse to the weathered quality of his skin. He was a man shaped by this land, and she wondered if she too could be shaped by it, could become someone who belonged here rather than a city girl playing at frontier life. There, Russell said, pointing ahead. That is your land starting at that fence line. Hannah's heart quickened as they crossed onto her property. The fencing was in poor repair. She could see that immediately, but the land itself was beautiful in the golden evening light. Rolling hills covered in prairie grass, stands of trees that promised shade and lumber, and in the distance, the house and barn her uncle had built with his own hands. As they drew closer, Hannah tried to see the homestead with fresh eyes, tried not to focus on the obvious problems. The house sagged slightly on one corner, and the porch steps looked treacherous. The barn had several boards missing from its side, and the corral fence was falling down in places. Weeds had overtaken what had once been a kitchen garden, and an old wagon with a broken axle sat abandoned near the barn, but the bones were good. The house was larger than she had remembered, 2 stories with real glass windows. The barn could hold a dozen horses and twice as many cattle. There was a chicken coop, a smokehouse, and a root cellar whose sturdy door suggested it was still functional. And the view was magnificent. From the porch, she could see for miles, could watch the sun setting over the western hills painting the sky in shades of coral and gold. "What do you think?" Russell asked quietly, and Hannah realized he had been watching her reaction. "I think it is perfect," she said, and she meant it. He helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady at her waist, and for just a moment they stood close enough that Hannah could smell the clean scent of leather and wood smoke that clung to him. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat slightly, and began unloading her belongings. "Let me check inside first," he said, pulling his revolver from its holster. "Just to make sure you do not have any unexpected visitors." Hannah waited on the porch, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness as Russell moved through the house. She heard his boots on the wooden floors, heard a door creak open and then close. After a few minutes he returned. "All clear. Place is dusty but sound. Your uncle kept it well maintained until he got sick. I will start a fire in the stove so you can heat some water, get the dust off." Over the next hour, Russell proved himself invaluable. He got the stove working and the lamps lit. He found the well and primed the pump until clear water flowed. He carried her trunk upstairs to the bedroom and brought in the supplies. When Hannah insisted on helping, he did not argue or treat her like she was made of porcelain, which she appreciated more than he could know. "There is a good stack of firewood in the barn," he said, as full darkness fell, and they stood in the warm glow of the kitchen. "Enough to last you a couple weeks if you are careful. I will send one of my hands over in a few days with more. You will also need to get into town soon to hire some help if you are serious about working this place. You cannot do it alone." "I know," Hannah said. "But first I need to assess what needs to be done and in what order. I have some money saved, but not enough to be wasteful." Russell nodded approvingly. "That is smart thinking. I can help you with that assessment if you want. Tomorrow, if you are up for it, we can walk the property, see what the priorities are." "You do not have to do that. You must have your own work to attend to." "I do, but it can wait a day. Besides," he met her eyes directly, something he had been doing more frequently as the evening wore on, "I have a vested interest in seeing this ranch succeed. A thriving neighbor is good for everyone in the area. If your place fails and gets bought up by one of the big outfits from Texas, they will be looking to expand onto my land next." Hannah understood this was partly true, but she suspected there was more to his offer than simple self-interest. There was a loneliness in Russell Foster that called to the loneliness in her own soul, a recognition of kindred spirits who had both been hurt by life but refused to surrender to bitterness. "Then I accept your help gratefully," she said. "Would you like some coffee before you ride home?" "It is the least I can offer after everything you have done." They sat at her uncle's old kitchen table, drinking strong coffee from tin cups, and talked as the night deepened around them. Russell told her about the rhythms of ranch life, the seasonal work that never truly ended. He explained about water rights and grazing land, about the challenges of keeping livestock healthy and protected from predators. He was honest about the difficulties she would face, but he did not try to discourage her. Instead, he treated her like someone capable of meeting those challenges, and Hannah found herself sitting straighter, feeling stronger under his regard. "Your uncle used to run about 50 head of cattle," Russell said, "but he sold them off when he got too sick to manage. You will need to start small, maybe 10 or 15 head to begin with. Build your herd slowly." "What about horses? The lawyer said my uncle had horses once." "He did, beautiful animals. But a fever swept through 3 years ago, took nearly every horse in the county. Your uncle lost all but one old mare and she died of age last winter. I buried her out past the barn. I hope you do not mind." "No, of course not. Thank you for doing that." Hannah wrapped her hands around the warm cup, thinking about all the loss this place had endured. "Everyone in town seems to think this ranch is cursed. Do you believe in curses, Russell?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. "I believe in bad luck and hard times. I believe that sometimes life deals you a hand that seems impossible to play. But I also believe that luck changes, that hard times end if you can just hold on long enough. Your uncle had a run of misfortune, no denying that, but that does not mean you will." "That is what I tried to tell those men in town," Hannah said softly. "That things can get better if you approach them with hope and determination." They laughed at me. Russell looked up, his blue eyes intense in the lamplight. "Then they are fools. Hannah, can I be honest with you?" She nodded, her heart suddenly beating faster at his use of her first name. "When I first heard Thomas's niece was coming from back east to take over the ranch, I figured you would take one look at the place, turn around and go home. And when the lawyer told me you were a young, unmarried woman, I was sure of it. I thought it was a damn shame, pardon my language, because this land deserves someone who will love it and fight for it. But after talking with you tonight, hearing your plans, seeing the way you look at this place, I think maybe you are exactly what this ranch needs." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, tears of relief and validation. "Thank you. You cannot know how much it means to hear someone say that. I mean it. Your optimism, your hope, that is not weakness. That is strength. That is what will keep you going when the work is backbreaking and the problems seem endless. That is what will help you see possibilities where others only see obstacles." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers briefly, before he seemed to realize what he was doing and pulled back. "Your hope is exactly what this ranch needs. Do not let anyone make you doubt that." They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily between practical matters and more personal revelations. Hannah learned that Russell loved this land with a fierce passion, that he had turned down offers to sell his ranch and move to town, that he could not imagine any other life despite its hardships. Russell learned that Hannah had spent her life dreaming of space and freedom, that she had felt suffocated in Philadelphia's narrow streets and narrower expectations, that coming here felt like finally being able to breathe deeply. When Russell finally stood to leave, reluctance evident in the slow way he pushed back his chair, the comfortable kitchen felt too empty at the thought of his absence. "I will be back tomorrow morning early," he said. "We will start with the barn, see what repairs are most urgent." "I will be ready," Hannah promised. At the door, Russell paused, his hat in his hands. "Lock this behind me, and if you hear anything strange, anything at all, you fire that rifle I saw in the corner. I will hear it and come running." "I will be fine," Hannah assured him, though she appreciated his concern. "I know you will." He settled his hat on his head. "Good night, Hannah. Good night, Russell." She watched from the porch as he mounted his horse and rode off into the darkness, the sound of hoofbeats gradually fading until she was alone with the night sounds of her new home. Crickets sang in the grass, an owl hooted from the barn, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. Instead of feeling frightened, Hannah felt exhilarated. This was hers, all of it. The land, the challenges, the possibilities. And she had found an unexpected ally in Russell Foster, a man who seemed to understand her in a way no one else ever had. She went back inside, locked the door as he had instructed, and climbed the stairs to the bedroom where her trunk waited. As she prepared for bed, washing with the warm water Russell had heated and changing into her nightgown, Hannah thought about the way he had looked at her across the kitchen table, the way his voice had softened when he spoke about hope and strength. There had been something in his eyes, a warmth that had nothing to do with the lamplight and everything to do with genuine admiration. She fell asleep in her uncle's old bed, in her own house, on her own land, with the windows open to let in the cool night breeze and the promise of tomorrow bringing Russell Foster back to her door. Hannah woke with the dawn, something she had never done in Philadelphia, where heavy curtains kept out the early light. Here, the sun streamed through the thin curtains, painting everything gold, and she rose eagerly to begin her first full day as a rancher. She dressed in her oldest day dress, one she had planned to use for housework, and went downstairs to light the stove and make coffee. She was sweeping the porch when Russell arrived, riding in just as the sun cleared the eastern hills. He had brought fresh eggs and a loaf of bread that he said his housekeeper had baked. "You have a housekeeper?" Hannah asked, surprised. "Mrs. Chen. Her husband was one of the railroad workers who came through 10 years back. When the work dried up, they stayed in the area. Mr. Chen works as a carpenter in town, and Mrs. Chen helps me keep the house from becoming a complete disaster. She comes 3 times a week." He dismounted, tying his horse to the porch rail. "I told her about you. She said to tell you that if you need anything, women's advice or help, you should come by." "That is very kind of her." They ate a quick breakfast, and then Russell led her on a thorough tour of the property. In the bright morning light, the problems were more apparent, but so were the solutions. The barn needed new boards, which could be milled from the trees on the property. The fences needed replacing, a big job but straightforward. The corral could be rebuilt. The house needed some shoring up on that one corner, new steps on the porch, and several other minor repairs. "It is a lot," Russell admitted as they stood in the barn, looking at the damaged stalls. "But none of it is impossible. If you can hire 2 good men, and if I can spare one of my hands to help a few days a week, you could have this place operational in a month or 2. 2 months, Hannah repeated, calculating the cost in her head. She had money but not infinite resources. Every decision had to be weighed carefully. Maybe less if we get lucky with the weather and the work goes smoothly. Russell walked the length of the barn, examining the structure. "The roof is solid, that is the important thing, and the foundation is good. Your uncle built to last." They spent the morning making lists and plans. Russell proved to be patient and thorough, explaining things in terms Hannah could understand, never making her feel stupid for her ignorance. When she had questions, he answered them fully. When she had ideas, he listened seriously and helped her think through the practical implications. Around noon, they took a break, sitting in the shade of a massive oak tree near the creek that ran through the property. Hannah had packed a lunch of the bread and eggs, along with some cheese and apples she had brought from town. They ate in comfortable silence, listening to the water burble over stones and watching a hawk circle overhead. "Can I ask you something?" Hannah said after a while. "Of course." "Why are you helping me so much? I mean, I understand about being neighbors, but this is more than that. You barely know me." Russell was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the distant hills. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I suppose there are several reasons. One is that I really did respect your uncle. He helped me when my father died, gave me advice, loaned me money when I was short one winter. I figure helping you is a way of repaying that debt. And the other reasons," he turned to look at her directly. "Honestly, I am impressed by you. You remind me of why I love this life, this land. Sometimes I get so caught up in the daily struggle that I forget to see the beauty and potential. You look at your broken-down barn and see possibility. You look at overgrown fields and see future harvests. That is a gift, Hannah, and it is one I seem to have lost somewhere along the way. Being around you, it is helping me find it again." Hannah felt warmth spread through her chest. "I thought I was the one who needed help." "Maybe we are helping each other," Russell said softly, and there was something in his eyes that made Hannah's breath catch. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibility, and then Russell cleared his throat and stood. "We should get back to work. I want to show you the spring before I have to head back to my place." The spring was in a grove of trees on the northern edge of the property, water bubbling up clear and cold from the limestone rock. It was beautiful and serene, a place that felt almost sacred in its tranquility. "This is one of the springs that gave the area its name," Russell explained. "The water is pure, never runs dry even in the worst drought. Your uncle built a spring house here." He showed her the small stone structure that kept milk and other perishables cool. "With a spring like this, you will always have water for your household and your livestock. That is a huge advantage." "It is beautiful," Hannah breathed, trailing her fingers in the cold water. "It is," Russell agreed, but when Hannah looked up, he was watching her face, not the spring. They walked back to the house together, their conversation flowing easily despite the undercurrent of awareness that seemed to grow stronger with each passing hour. At the porch, Russell retrieved his horse. "I will be back the day after tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow I have to move part of my herd to different grazing land, but Thursday I can spare the time." That will give you a day to rest and get the house more settled. Maybe make a trip to town to start asking about hiring help. Thank you, Russell, for everything. He mounted his horse, looking down at her with an expression that was becoming familiar, a mixture of concern and something warmer. Remember what I said. You need anything, you come find me, and keep that rifle handy. Hannah watched him ride away, then turned to survey her property with new eyes. The work ahead was daunting, but with Russell's help and her own determination, she could see the path forward. More than that, she could feel something blooming inside her that had nothing to do with ranching and everything to do with the quiet cowboy who believed in her when no one else did. The next day, Hannah threw herself into making the house livable. She scrubbed floors and washed windows, beat the dust from curtains and rugs, and organized her belongings into the spaces her uncle had left empty. The physical labor was exhausting but satisfying, and by evening the house felt less like a dusty memorial and more like a home. The following morning, she hitched the wagon and drove into Eureka Springs, determined to find workers and supplies. The town seemed less hostile than on her first visit, or perhaps she simply cared less about the skeptical looks. She found the general store and placed an order for lumber and nails, arranged for delivery later in the week. At the feed store, she inquired about hands looking for work. Most of the good ones are already employed, the proprietor told her. But there is a young fellow been hanging around name of Samuel Parker. He is only 19, but he is a hard worker and knows his way around horses and cattle. His family has a small farm south of here, but they do not have enough work to keep him busy full-time. Hannah took down the information and went to find Samuel Parker. She discovered him at the livery stable, mucking out stalls. He was tall and gangly, with red hair and a face full of freckles, and he looked at her with surprise when she introduced herself and explained what she was looking for. "You want to hire me, madam?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "To work on the Jenkins place. If you are interested and capable, I can pay a fair wage, though I will be honest that I am just starting out and cannot match what the bigger ranches offer." Samuel's face split into a wide grin. "Madam, I would be proud to work for you. I knew Mr. Jenkins. He was a good man. And I do not care what anyone says, that ranch can be brought back. When can you start? Tomorrow if you need me." They settled on terms, and Hannah felt a surge of accomplishment. One hired hand, one step forward. She asked Samuel if he knew anyone else who might be looking for work, and he suggested his older friend, a man named Jack Wright, who had just returned from working cattle drives in Texas. "Jack knows more about ranching than anyone I have ever met," Samuel said enthusiastically. "And he has been saying he is ready to settle in one place for a while. I can ask him if you want. Please do. Tell him to come by the ranch tomorrow if he is interested." Hannah finished her errands and headed back home, feeling more optimistic than ever. The wagon was loaded with supplies. She had hired one worker and had a lead on another, and tomorrow Russell would be back. Life was taking shape in ways she had barely dared to hope for. She arrived home to find a surprise waiting on her porch. A basket covered with a checked cloth and a note in neat handwriting that said, "Welcome to the neighborhood, from Mrs. Chen." Inside the basket, Hannah found fresh bread, a jar of preserves, a small crock of butter, and cookies that melted in her mouth. Touched by the kindness, Hannah resolved to visit Mrs. Chen as soon as possible to thank her properly. That evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Hannah reflected on how much her life had changed in just a few days. She had gone from being a dependent in someone else's house to being the owner of her own property. She had gone from being mocked and discouraged to having allies and employees. And she had met a man who looked at her like she was capable of moving mountains. A man who made her heart beat faster every time she thought of him. She went to bed that night with a sense of contentment she had never known before, and she dreamed of blue eyes and gentle hands, of a voice telling her that her hope was exactly what this ranch needed. Russell arrived the next morning with another man, one of his hands named Tom, and a wagon loaded with tools and lumber. Hannah was delighted to see him, and from the way his face lit up when he spotted her coming out of the house, the feeling was mutual. "I thought we could make a start on the barn repairs," Russell said after greeting her. "Tom here is one of the best carpenters around. Between the three of us, we can get those stalls fixed and some of those missing boards replaced." "Four of us, actually," Hannah said. "I hired a hand yesterday. Samuel Parker, he should be arriving soon." Russell looked impressed. "Samuel is a good kid, a little green but eager and honest. That is a smart hire." Samuel arrived within the hour and Jack Wright came with him. Jack was in his early 30s, weathered and lean, with the quiet competence of a man who had spent his life working with animals and land. He spoke little, but his eyes were sharp as he looked over the property, and when Hannah offered him the job, he accepted with a firm handshake. "I will do right by you, madam," he said. "This place has good bones. It will come back strong with the right care." With the crew assembled, work began in earnest. Russell directed the efforts, his experience and natural leadership evident in the way he organized tasks and explained what needed to be done. Hannah worked alongside the men, holding boards while Russell nailed them in place, hauling supplies, and learning the basics of construction and repair. By the end of the first day, the barn looked noticeably better. The damaged stalls were repaired, the missing boards replaced, and the whole structure seemed to stand straighter. Hannah's hands were blistered and her muscles ached, but she had never felt more alive. Russell stayed after the others left, helping Hannah prepare a simple dinner. They had fallen into an easy rhythm, working together as if they had been doing it for years rather than days. As they sat at the kitchen table eating beans and cornbread, Russell asked about her plans for livestock. "I was thinking I would go to the cattle auction in Harrison next month," Hannah said. "Samuel said that is where the best prices are." "It is, but you should not go alone. Cattle traders can be sharp, especially with someone they think does not know what they are doing. Let me go with you. I can help you spot quality animals and make sure you do not get cheated. You have already done so much." "Hannah," Russell said, his voice serious, "I want to help, not because I feel obligated, but because I want to see you succeed. And maybe because I enjoy your company more than I have enjoyed anyone's company in a very long time." Hannah's heart skipped a beat. "I enjoy your company too." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken emotion. Russell reached across the table, his rough hand covering her smaller one, his thumb brushing gently over her knuckles. "I know this is probably too soon, and maybe I should keep my feelings to myself, but I am not a man who plays games or hides what I am thinking. From the moment I met you, standing there on that street refusing to let those fools dim your light, I felt something I have not felt in years. You are remarkable, Hannah Jenkins. You are brave and strong and so full of hope it makes me believe that good things are still possible in this world." Hannah turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. "I feel it too, this connection between us. I did not come here looking for anything except a chance to build a life of my own, but then I met you, and suddenly everything seems brighter, more possible." Russell stood, pulling her gently to her feet, and for a moment they simply stood there, hands clasped, looking into each other's eyes. Then, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Russell cupped her face in his calloused hands and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, tender and searching, and Hannah felt it all the way to her toes. She had been kissed before, chased pecks from suitors her aunt had approved of, but nothing like this. This kiss spoke of longing and promise, of two lonely souls finding unexpected connection. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard. "I am sorry," Russell said, though he did not look sorry. "That was probably improper." "I do not care about proper," Hannah said, surprising herself with her boldness. "I care about what is real and true. And this, what I feel when I am with you, that is the most real and true thing I have ever experienced." Russell kissed her again, less gently this time, with more passion and promise. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I should go before I forget myself entirely. But Hannah, I want you to know, my intentions are honorable. I am not playing with your affections." "I know," she whispered. "I trust you, Russell." He left reluctantly, and Hannah stood on the porch watching until he disappeared into the darkness. Then she went inside, touching her lips and smiling like a fool, her heart so full she thought it might burst. The next weeks fell into a pattern that felt both industrious and increasingly intimate. Every few days, Russell would arrive to help with projects, and Hannah's small crew would work from sunrise to sunset, transforming the ranch bit by bit. The barn was fully repaired. New fencing went up around the corrals. The porch got new steps. The sagging corner of the house was shored up properly. Samuel proved to be an excellent worker, enthusiastic and quick to learn. Jack was quieter but incredibly skilled, and Hannah soon learned to trust his judgment on practical matters. And Russell was there as often as he could be, his own ranch permitting, teaching her everything he knew about the land and livestock, and courting her with a steadiness that made her feel cherished. They stole moments together when they could, a kiss in the barn when no one was looking, sitting close on the porch in the evening, talking about dreams and plans, a picnic by the spring where Russell told her about his childhood and she told him about hers. Each conversation, each touch, each shared laugh deepened the bond between them. The town slowly began to change its attitude toward Hannah. When she drove in for supplies and people saw that the ranch was actually improving, that she had hired good men and was doing real work, the mockery faded. Some even began to offer grudging respect. The minister stopped by one Sunday to invite her to services. The mercantile owner asked her opinion on what supplies ranchers needed most. She was becoming part of the community rather than an outsider to be pitied or scorned. 5 weeks after Hannah arrived in Eureka Springs, Russell took her to the cattle auction in Harrison as promised. It was a long day's ride, so they left before dawn, Jack and Samuel coming along to help drive any purchased cattle home. The auction was loud and chaotic, overwhelming to Hannah's inexperienced eyes, but Russell was patient, pointing out good animals and warning her away from obvious problems. "That one there, the red heifer," Russell said, pointing to a young cow being led into the ring. "See how she moves. Strong legs, good weight, clear eyes. That is the kind of animal you want to build a herd on." Hannah bid on the heifer and won her for a fair price. Over the course of the day, she purchased 12 head of cattle, all young and healthy, all carefully selected with Russell's guidance. It was a significant investment, using up a large portion of her savings, but as Russell explained, it was necessary. You could not have a ranch without a herd. On the ride home, with the cattle lowing behind them and the sun setting ahead, Russell rode close to Hannah's wagon. "You did well today. Those are good animals. In a few years, with proper care, that herd could triple in size." "I could not have done it without you," Hannah said honestly. "I would have been lost in there. You would have figured it out. You always do, but I am glad I could help." He reached over, his hand finding hers where it rested on the wagon seat, and they rode that way for a while, fingers intertwined, not speaking but communicating everything that mattered through that simple touch. When they reached Hannah's ranch and got the cattle settled in the repaired corrals, Russell dismissed Jack and Samuel, telling them he would finish up. Once they were alone, he pulled Hannah into his arms in the gathering twilight. "I have been thinking," he said, his voice low and serious. "About us, about the future. Hannah, I know it has only been a few weeks, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I am falling in love with you. No, that is not right. I have already fallen. I love you, Hannah Jenkins. I love your optimism and your strength. I love the way you face challenges with hope instead of fear. I love who I am when I am with you." Hannah's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears. "I love you too, Russell. I think I started falling for you the first day we met, when you were the only person who believed I could do this." "Marry me," Russell said, the words both a question and a plea. "I know it is fast, I know people will talk, but I do not care. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to combine our ranches, make them both stronger together than they could ever be apart. I want to fill that big house of yours with children and laughter and love. Say yes, Hannah. Please say yes." "Yes," Hannah said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you, Russell Foster. Nothing would make me happier." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, a kiss that sealed promises and spoke of passion barely restrained. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and grinning like children. "How soon?" Russell asked. "I do not want a long engagement. I have waited long enough for happiness." "Neither do I. As soon as we can arrange it. A month. 2 weeks, Russell countered. "I will talk to the minister tomorrow." 2 weeks, Hannah agreed, and they sealed the bargain with another kiss. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity and excitement. Hannah wrote to her few friends back east, announcing her engagement. Russell told his hands and Mrs. Chen, who declared herself thrilled, and immediately began planning a wedding feast. The news spread through Eureka Springs quickly, and reactions were mixed. Some people thought it was romantic. Others thought it was scandalous how quickly the relationship had progressed. But Hannah found she did not care. She was marrying the man she loved, and no amount of gossip could diminish her joy. Mrs. Chen, who Hannah had visited several times and grown fond of, helped her make over a dress for the ceremony. It was not fancy, just a simple blue cotton that matched Hannah's eyes, but Mrs. Chen added some beautiful lace at the collar and cuffs that made it special. "You will be beautiful bride," Mrs. Chen said as she made the final adjustments. "Russell is good man. You are good match." "Thank you," Hannah said warmly, "for everything. Your kindness has meant so much to me." "You are welcome here now," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "You are part of this place, part of this community. People see that. They see you work hard, see you make ranch come alive again. They respect that." The wedding took place on a Saturday afternoon in September, in the little church in Eureka Springs. Hannah had no family to stand with her, but Samuel offered to walk her down the aisle, and she accepted gratefully. Russell stood at the altar looking handsome in a new suit, his brother remarkably having arrived from San Francisco for the occasion, a surprise that clearly moved Russell deeply. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When the minister asked if anyone objected to the union, Hannah held her breath, half expecting someone to voice the doubts the town had harbored about her ability to succeed. But there was only supportive silence, and when Russell slipped a simple gold band on her finger and kissed her as his wife, the small congregation applauded. The reception was held at Russell's ranch, which would now be their home. Hannah's house would be kept for the hands to use, and eventually, once they expanded operations, it would serve as quarters for a foreman. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself with the food, and someone had brought a fiddle, and there was music and dancing and more joy than Hannah had known could exist in one place. As the sun began to set and guests started to depart, Russell pulled Hannah aside, leading her away from the celebration to a quiet spot overlooking his land, which was now her land too. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," Hannah said honestly. 3 months ago, I was living in Philadelphia, feeling like my life was over before it had really begun. Now I am married to the man I love. I have a ranch and a future and a place where I belong. It is more than I ever hoped for." "You took a chance," Russell said. "You could have stayed in Philadelphia, found some safe, respectable life. Instead, you came west to claim something that everyone told you was impossible. Your courage changed everything, Hannah. It changed your life and it changed mine." "Our courage," Hannah corrected. "You took a chance on me too. You could have let me fail, could have stood back and watched like everyone expected. Instead, you believed in me, you helped me, you loved me. We did this together, Russell." "Together," he agreed, kissing her softly. "That is how it will always be from now on. Whatever challenges come, we will face them together." They stood there as the stars began to appear, wrapped in each other's arms, listening to the sounds of celebration behind them and the peaceful sounds of the land around them. Hannah thought about that first day in Eureka Springs, standing on the dusty street while men mocked her optimism. She thought about Russell's words that had given her hope when she needed it most. "Your hope is exactly what this ranch needs." But it had not been just the ranch that needed her hope. Russell had needed it too, to remind him why he had fallen in love with this life in the first place. And she had needed him, to show her that she was stronger and more capable than she had ever imagined. Together, they had built something beautiful from broken pieces, had turned doubt into certainty, loneliness into love. The first months of marriage were a period of adjustment and discovery. Hannah moved into Russell's house, which was larger and in better condition than her uncle's, though she still spent time each day at her own property, overseeing the work that Jack and Samuel continued to do there. The two ranches began to function as one operation, with cattle and horses moving between the properties as needed. Russell proved to be a patient and gentle husband, considerate of Hannah's inexperience in all matters marital. Their wedding night had been tender and full of whispered promises, and as weeks passed, their physical intimacy deepened alongside their emotional connection. Hannah discovered that the passion she felt for Russell extended beyond stolen kisses, and he showed her the depths of love that could exist between a husband and wife. By December, as the first snows began to dust the Ozark Hills, Hannah realized she was pregnant. She told Russell one evening as they sat by the fire in their parlor, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest. "I think I am going to have a baby," she said softly, feeling him tense with surprise and then relax into joy. "Truly." He pulled back to look at her face, his own alight with happiness. "Hannah, that is wonderful. Are you certain as I can be? I have missed my courses and I have been feeling strange in the mornings. Mrs. Chen said those are the signs." Russell pulled her close, his hand coming to rest protectively over her still flat stomach. "A baby, our child. Hannah, you have given me everything I never dared to dream of. A wife I love, a thriving ranch, and now a family." "We have given each other everything," Hannah corrected, a phrase that had become their refrain. "This is our dream, Russell, built together." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter months. Hannah continued to work on the ranch, though Russell and the hands became increasingly protective. insisting she avoid heavy lifting and take frequent rests. She divided her time between managing the household, keeping the ranch accounts, and planning for the expansion they hoped to achieve in the coming year. In March, as the land began to wake from its winter sleep, Russell came home one evening with news. "I heard in town that the Crowley place is going up for sale. You remember that abandoned property I pointed out when you first arrived?" Hannah nodded. The Crowley place was a good-sized parcel between their two properties, with a natural spring and excellent grazing land. "If we could buy it," Russell continued, his excitement evident, "we could consolidate all three parcels into one continuous ranch. We would control the best water rights in the area and have enough land to support a herd of several hundred cattle. It would make us one of the most successful operations in the region." "Can we afford it?" Hannah asked practically. "If we pool our resources and take out a small loan, yes, it would be a risk, but I think it is a calculated one. With the way cattle prices are rising and with the railroad talk of extending lines through this area, I think land values are only going to increase." They discussed the idea for weeks, weighing the risks and benefits. Finally, they decided to pursue it. Russell negotiated with the bank, and Hannah contributed her remaining savings. In late April, they became the owners of the Crowley property, expanding their holdings significantly. "You realize what we have built?" Russell asked as they rode together over their newly acquired land, Hannah sitting carefully in the saddle despite her growing belly. "In less than a year, you went from owning a failing ranch to being one of the largest landowners in the county. You did that, Hannah. Your optimism, your willingness to take risks, your hard work, this is your success." "Our success," Hannah insisted as always. "I could never have done any of this without you." "Then we are fortunate to have found each other," Russell said, leaning over to kiss her despite the awkwardness of being on horseback. Their son was born on a warm June evening, with Mrs. Chen attending as midwife and Russell pacing frantically outside the bedroom door. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Russell feared he might lose them both, but Hannah proved as strong in childbirth as she was in everything else. When Mrs. Chen finally emerged to tell him he had a healthy son and his wife was doing well, Russell nearly collapsed with relief. He entered the bedroom to find Hannah propped up against pillows, looking exhausted but radiant, a tiny bundle in her arms. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Russell approached almost reverently, looking down at the red-faced, squalling infant. "He is perfect," he breathed. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, unable to agree on anything that felt quite right. But as Hannah looked at her son, then at her husband, the answer seemed obvious. "Thomas," she said, "after my uncle who gave me the chance to find this life, and his middle name should be James after your father." "Thomas James Foster," Russell said, testing the name. "I like it. I like it very much." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, his arm around Hannah, looking down at their son. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you for giving me this family, this life, this love." "Thank you for believing in me when no one else would," Hannah replied. "Thank you for seeing my hope as strength instead of foolishness." Little Thomas proved to be a healthy, happy baby who thrived under his parents' devoted care. Hannah discovered that she loved motherhood as much as she loved ranching, though balancing both required careful organization. Russell was a hands-on father, surprising some of the more traditional members of the community by changing diapers and walking the floor with a fussy baby without complaint. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to flourish. The herd increased every year. They added horses, breeding and training animals that became known for their quality. They built a second barn on the old Crowley property, and hired additional hands as the work expanded. Hannah kept meticulous accounts, and her business sense proved as sharp as her optimism. She negotiated good prices for their cattle, secured favorable terms from suppliers, and managed the household finances with skill. By the time Thomas was 3, the Foster Ranch was well established as one of the most successful operations in the region. They were not wealthy by big city standards, but they were prosperous and secure, with a beautiful home, productive land, and a strong reputation. On a sunny afternoon in the late summer of 1885, Hannah and Russell stood together on the porch of their home, watching Thomas chase chickens in the yard while Jack and Samuel, who had both stayed on as permanent hands, worked in the distance. "You ever regret it?" Russell asked, his arm around Hannah's waist. "Giving up the safety and comfort of city life for all this?" Hannah laughed. "Not for a single moment. Russell, I was dying in Philadelphia, slowly suffocating under the weight of other people's expectations. Coming here, building this life with you, it saved me. It gave me purpose and joy and a place where I truly belong." "I asked you once if you believed in curses," Russell said. "Do you remember?" "I remember. You told me you believed in bad luck and hard times, but that luck could change if you held on long enough." "I was right," Russell said. "But I learned something else from you. Luck does not just change on its own. It changes because people like you refuse to accept defeat. Because you face challenges with hope instead of despair. Your optimism was not foolishness, Hannah. It was the force that changed everything. You changed this ranch. You changed this community's perception of what was possible, and you changed me." Hannah turned in his arms, looking up at the man she loved more with each passing year. "We changed each other. You taught me that I was stronger than I believed. You showed me that taking risks could lead to rewards beyond imagining. We were both lonely, both lost in our own ways, and we found each other just when we needed each other most." "Your hope is exactly what this ranch needed," Russell said, echoing the words he had spoken to her that first week, words that had sustained her through doubt and difficulty. "But it was also what I needed, what I will always need." "Then it is a good thing I have plenty to share," Hannah said, pulling him down for a kiss. Thomas ran up to the porch, his small face flushed with exertion and joy. "Mama, Papa, watch me," he called, and they turned to watch their son perform some feat of childhood acrobatics that was more enthusiasm than skill. "He has your energy," Russell observed with amusement. "And your stubbornness," Hannah countered. "A dangerous combination," Russell said, but his eyes were full of love and pride. That evening, after Thomas was tucked into bed and the house was quiet, Hannah and Russell sat together on their porch, watching the sun set over their land. It was a ritual they had maintained since their wedding, this evening time to simply be together and appreciate what they had built. "I am pregnant again," Hannah said quietly, and Russell's head whipped around to stare at her. "Again? Already? Hannah, that is wonderful." He pulled her close, his hand moving to her stomach as it always did when they spoke of babies. "When? February, I think. Mrs. Chen is going to come by tomorrow to confirm." "2 children," Russell said, wonder in his voice. "Our family is growing. Are you happy?" Hannah asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it. Hannah, 4 years ago I was resigned to a life of solitude. I thought I would work my ranch alone, grow old alone, die alone. Then you arrived, with your Philadelphia manners and your unshakable optimism, and your determination to succeed despite everyone telling you it was impossible. You turned my world upside down in the best possible way." "The best possible way," Hannah repeated softly. "That is exactly how I feel about this life. It is not the life I planned when I was a girl dreaming of the future. It is better. It is real and challenging and full of love. It is exactly what I needed, even though I did not know it until I found it. Their second child, a daughter they named Rose, was born in late February on a cold, clear day. The birth was easier than Thomas's had been, and Rose proved to be a calm, contented baby who rarely fussed. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from changing her clothes to feeding her bottles of expressed milk. As the years continued to pass, the foster family grew and thrived. 2 years after Rose, Hannah gave birth to twin boys whom they named Henry and William. The house that had once seemed too large for one lonely cowboy was now filled with the sounds of children laughing, playing, and occasionally fighting. Russell proved to be a devoted father, patient and loving, and Hannah balanced motherhood with her continued involvement in ranch management. The ranch itself became one of the most respected operations in Arkansas. They expanded again, purchasing another adjoining property when it became available. Their cattle were sought after at auctions. Their horses gained a reputation for being well-trained and reliable. And Hannah herself became something of a local legend, the woman who had taken a failing ranch and turned it into a success through sheer determination and optimism. On their 10th anniversary, Russell surprised Hannah with a gift. He led her out to the barn where he had been working secretly for weeks and revealed a beautiful new buggy painted deep blue with gold trim. "It is gorgeous," Hannah breathed, running her hand over the smooth wood. "Russell, this is too much." "Nothing is too much for you," Russell said firmly. "You have given me 10 years of happiness, 4 beautiful children, and a life beyond my wildest dreams. A buggy is a small token of my gratitude and love." "Should we take it for a drive?" Hannah suggested, her eyes sparkling. They left the children with Mrs. Chen, who had become almost a member of the family over the years, and drove out to the spring where Russell had first shown Hannah the beauty of her property. It was a warm spring day, and the trees were in full bloom, filling the air with sweet fragrance. "Do you remember when we came here that first week?" Russell asked as they sat by the water. "I was trying to show you all the reasons your ranch could succeed, and you were looking at everything with such hope and determination." "I remember being terrified that I had made a terrible mistake," Hannah admitted, "but also knowing that I could not go back, that this was my one chance to build something of my own." "I fell in love with you that day," Russell said. "Watching you trail your fingers in this water, seeing the joy on your face at the beauty around you. I thought you were the bravest person I had ever met. And I fell in love with you the day you told me my hope was what this ranch needed," Hannah replied. "Because you were the first person who saw my optimism as a strength rather than a delusion. You believed in me, Russell, and that belief gave me the courage to believe in myself." "We have built a good life," Russell said, pulling her close. "A life full of love and family and purpose. And it all started because you refused to let anyone tell you it was impossible." "It started because we found each other," Hannah corrected. "Two lonely people who needed each other more than we knew." They sat there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, listening to the spring water and the birds and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. They talked about their children, about the ranch, about their hopes for the future. And they reaffirmed the love that had sustained them through challenges and celebrated with them through triumphs. As the afternoon waned, they drove back to their home, where their children rushed out to greet them and the evening chores awaited. It was an ordinary moment in an extraordinary life, and Hannah savored it fully. The years continued their steady march. Thomas grew into a tall, serious boy who loved working with the cattle. Rose became her mother's shadow, learning to manage the household and keep accounts. The twins were wild and energetic, keeping everyone on their toes. And when Hannah was 40, to everyone's surprise, including her own, she gave birth to one more child, another daughter they named Grace. By then, the Foster Ranch was legendary in the region. They employed a dozen hands year-round, had expanded their holdings to over 2,000 acres, and ran a herd of several hundred cattle along with dozens of horses. They had weathered droughts and economic downturns, disease outbreaks and harsh winters, but they had survived and thrived through it all. The town of Eureka Springs had changed too. It had grown into a small city, famous for its healing springs and beautiful scenery. The railroad had come through as predicted, bringing tourists and prosperity. And Hannah Foster was one of the town's most respected citizens, serving on committees, supporting the church and school, and mentoring other women who wanted to pursue business ventures. One evening, when Grace was 5 and their oldest son Thomas was grown and working the ranch alongside his father, Hannah and Russell sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Their hair was now streaked with silver, their faces lined by years and weather, but the love between them burned as bright as ever. "We should write it all down," Hannah said suddenly. "Our story, how we met, how we built this life, so our children and grandchildren will know." "What would we call it?" Russell asked, amused by the idea. "The truth," Hannah said. "That hope and love and hard work can transform anything. That taking chances leads to rewards. That finding the right person makes everything possible." "That is a long title," Russell teased. "Then we will shorten it," Hannah said. "We will call it the story of a woman who refused to give up and a man who believed in her." "And loved her," Russell added. "Do not forget that part. The man loved her with everything he had." "I could never forget that," Hannah said softly. "It is the most important part of the story." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they had built together, the land that had challenged them and rewarded them, the land that had been the foundation for a love that had exceeded all their hopes and dreams. Hannah thought back to that frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Eureka Springs 28 years ago, armed with nothing but optimism and determination. She thought about the mockery she had endured, the doubts she had faced, the obstacles that had seemed insurmountable. And she thought about the quiet cowboy who had looked at her and seen strength where others saw foolishness, who had told her that her hope was exactly what this ranch needed. He had been right. Her hope had transformed the ranch. But more than that, it had transformed her life, had brought her love and family and purpose beyond anything she could have imagined in her wildest Philadelphia dreams. "No regrets?" Russell asked, as he had asked her so many times over the years. "Not a single one," Hannah replied, as she always did. "This life, this love, our family, our ranch, it is everything I never knew I was searching for. You are everything I never knew I needed." "The feeling is entirely mutual," Russell said, pulling her close and kissing her forehead. "You saved me, Hannah. You brought light and hope and joy back into my life when I had resigned myself to darkness. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "We saved each other," Hannah said, settling into his embrace. "That is what love does. It sees the best in us and calls it forth. It gives us the strength to be more than we ever thought we could be." They watched as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, their wedding, the births of their children, every triumph and challenge of their shared life. And they knew, with the certainty that comes from decades of love and partnership, that they would face whatever years remained together, as they had faced everything with hope, determination, and an unshakable faith in each other. The story of Hannah and Russell Foster became the story whispered around the region, told to young couples starting out and struggling ranchers facing hard times. It was the story of how optimism and hard work could overcome any obstacle, how love could flourish even in the hardest soil, how two people who believed in each other could build something lasting and beautiful. But for Hannah and Russell themselves, it was simply their life, their love, their legacy. It was mornings waking up together and evenings sitting on the porch. It was children growing and grandchildren being born and the ranch continuing to thrive under their stewardship. It was thousands of small moments of connection and understanding, of support and passion, of laughter and occasional tears. It was, in short, everything that mattered. And as they grew old together, surrounded by family and prosperity, both Hannah and Russell knew that taking chances on each other had been the best decision either of them had ever made. The woman who had been mocked for her optimism had proved all her doubters wrong, and the cowboy who had recognized her strength had gained everything he had ever wanted. Their love story became legendary, but they knew the truth. It was not legendary at all. It was real and human and beautiful in its simplicity. Two lonely people had found each other and built a life together. They had worked hard, loved deeply, and never lost faith in each other or in the future they were creating. That was the real story. That was the truth that mattered. And it was a truth that sustained them through all their days, from that first meeting on a dusty Arkansas street to their final years together. Still holding hands, still believing in possibilities, still grateful for the day they had found each other. Hannah Jenkins Foster and Russell James Foster lived long, productive lives, their ranch passing eventually to their children and then to their grandchildren, each generation adding their own chapter to the story. But the foundation remained the same, built on hope and optimism, on hard work and determination, on love and partnership. And somewhere, in the records of Eureka Springs and in the memories of families who knew them, their story lived on. The story of how a woman's hope transformed not just a failing ranch, but the heart of a lonely cowboy. The story of how believing in possibilities made those possibilities real. The story of how love, when it is true and deep and mutual, can overcome any obstacle and create something beautiful that lasts for generations. It was a good story. But more importantly, it was a true one. And that made all the difference.